Thanks for starting your Wednesday with us. We're going to get started today with that dramatic day in former President Trump's criminal trial. The jury heard from Stormy Daniels, a star witness, of course, at the center of the case.
That's right. The adult film actress took the stand just 10 feet or so from the former president, describing in explicit detail her alleged sexual encounter with him, which prosecutors say he tried to hide from voters in 2016. For his part, Trump has denied the encounter and any wrongdoing. His attorneys demanded a mistrial yesterday. They're arguing that Daniels' testimony was prejudicial to the jury and outside the scope of the case. The judge rejected that. Meanwhile, the judge overseeing his federal documents case in Florida indefinitely postponed the trial, which was set to begin in less than 2 weeks. We have a full team coverage this morning. In just a moment, we're going to talk to the woman who has been bringing the trial to life for us, the sketch artist Christine Cornell. But we begin with NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach and NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. So nice to see both of you. Gary, let me start with you. You heard from Stormy Daniels yesterday. She took the stand. This has been the testimony so many people have been waiting for. What is your big takeaway about her testimony?
I think there were two big things: relatability and credibility as it relates to the witness, Stormy Daniels. Nobody didn't need an introduction into who Stormy Daniels was when she took the stand there, but they really tried to make her a very relatable person. They talked about her growing up in Baton Rouge, didn't have a whole lot of money, became a nationally renowned equestrian in her process, graduated from college, went from there. And they talked about how she really became somebody who made it on her own through the adult film industry. So that was sort of the relatability of it all. And also, when she was on the stand, she talked about the idea that the jury was trying to relate to her. She was trying to sort of relate to the jury in that way. As it relates to the credibility, that is a big point here, because she's somebody who has not always told the truth about things related to this particular story, and that's something that the defense in cross-examination was really trying to point out as well.
Yeah, Danny, what are you feeling this morning? If you wake up, you're the prosecution, you're the defense, based on some of these pretty graphic details that we heard as the prosecution was questioning her, but then also some intense cross-examination.
If there is a conviction in the years to come, the big question will be, was this a risk that was too great given the benefit to the prosecution? This was a classic risk balancing analysis. Did the prosecution need Stormy Daniels? I can make the argument that they didn't. Number one, to the extent she established a transaction where Cohen paid her money, that was almost, in my view, established beyond a reasonable doubt by other witnesses already in this case. Second, was her testimony needed to show that the market value of her story increased at the time of the campaign? Maybe, but we already got a lot of that testimony from Hope Hicks. So with every witness, you have to balance what is the possible risk against the possible reward. And if 2 years from now, the appellate division says Stormy Daniels' testimony about the salacious sex encounters went too far and turned this into a quasi-sexual assault case when that's not what this is, and a conviction is overturned, well, then the risk wasn't worth the reward. But if not, make no mistake about it, the prosecution knew they were pushing the envelope because that evidence was just so fantastic for them. It really painted Trump in a very negative light. Who among us didn't come away from yesterday's testimony saying some version of ick in our heads and applying that ick to the defendant, which only helps the prosecution?
It was uncomfortable. Some of that testimony was uncomfortable, and it was kind of salacious in many cases. So how, Gary, did the jury react to that testimony?
I would compare this to a tennis match. You were seeing jurors go from Stormy Daniels to the prosecution, from Stormy Daniels to the prosecution, back and forth. They were very much paying attention. During some of the financial witnesses that we've seen over the past couple of days, some of them didn't seem to be totally paying attention the entire time. This was very different. They were absolutely taking notes. They were absolutely very interested. And it's going to be interesting to see, as this continues with the cross-examination on Thursday, if that attention keeps up.
Let's, Danny, before we let you go, talk about this decision out of Florida, classified documents case indefinitely postponed. It was supposed to get underway in just a couple weeks. What's going on here?
So it didn't appear that it was something just done by fiat. The judge issued an order explaining the reasons why there are a lot of pending motions, a lot of complexities. But the takeaway is obviously that there is no trial date set. In my experience, normally federal courts do set trial dates. Sometimes they're unreasonably soon, and they leave it to the parties to make motions and move those dates out. So having no trial date seems a little unusual to me, but there's a lot of talk about, can we get the judge recused? Can this become something that you can take up on appeal? And the answer to both of those is almost certainly no. Judges have considerable power to control their own dockets. Can you criticize this judge for managing hers not well? Sure. But Jack Smith really doesn't have a lot of options here. Sometimes you draw a judge that isn't favorable to your situation. In my jaded view as a criminal defense attorney, most of the time it's the defense drawing a former prosecutor judge. But Jack Smith knows that, hey, look, he just spun the roulette wheel and it didn't come up his number.
All right. Jaded Danny Cevallos, thank you so much, Gary Grunbach. Nice to see you both. Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
Definitely. Well, we're joined now by courtroom sketch artist Christine Cornell. She's been inside the courtroom since the trial began. She is giving us this imagery that we would not otherwise get. Christine, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. We are so interested to speak with you. So trial now, heating up. I love the detail that Gary just provided us with, that he sort of imagined it like a tennis match with the jury going back and forth, kind of watching, listening, taking in every detail as this really does kind of start to heat up with these star witnesses. I know you've been in courtrooms for a lot of high-profile, high-stakes cases. What was yesterday like, in your opinion? Just the mood in the room? Tense? Matter of fact, how did it feel?
I thought it was wonderful. I really loved Stormy Daniels. I thought she was the most actually authentic person. And I was very grateful that she was able to come out and give us something that made some reality of this, kind of flesh it out, that indeed there was some encounters and it didn't leave her happy. And she's been struggling with it for a long time to keep it in a place where it didn't run her life. And then it started to get out of control. And so it's completely understandable to me how her story would change because, everybody denies if they don't want it talked about. And now she's talking about it. So it's just the flip side of the same coin. He's very uncomfortable, obviously. And yeah, it did take our heads into places that I'm sure he would prefer that nobody was thinking about.
Christine, I wonder what it was like drawing her. I mean, because she is in the public imagination sort of frozen in time in 2006, and you got to see the real current day Stormy Daniels. What kind of responsibility was that to draw her?
Well, she's very energetic, very wound up gal. And I really, was reaching to try and get some of those qualities. She's obviously a very beautiful woman and a little bit older. And this was an awkward spot for her to be in, to have to talk about this stuff. So she was endearing, frankly.
I know the judge chided Mr. Trump for swearing under his breath during her testimony. Is that something you were close enough to hear?
That the judge was doing what?
He chided Mr. Trump for swearing under his breath. Did you hear that?
I did not. No, but it doesn't surprise me, of course. Nothing from Mr. Trump surprises me.
I wonder also, we've talked a lot about, of course, as I think a lot of Americans are, that, this is the first time that we're seeing anything like this, completely unprecedented, a former president in a criminal trial. I know you've covered so many different...
It's like the case we can get,
what is that like to be...
They want the criminal documents, but this is what we have.
But being in the room for this, actually drawing it, being one of the people that's providing images of a totally historical moment for the country, what's that feel like? Is it something that you think about a lot?
I've been doing this for so long that I don't really think about any historic aspect of it because it's just a new drama and, it's a new human drama. It's not if you want to say, isn't this an amazing scene? It's a little bit of a tawdry scene, frankly. Right. But it's, and as far as historic goes, infidelity is one of the most ancient crimes. So it's not like something astonishing happened here. It's all about the cover-up.
Right.
And that's the only thing. It's really a very dry case.
Christine, you're such a sort of a legend in New York court circles. I have to say, for those of our viewers who are watching, you have covered, here's a short list of what you've covered. Bernie Madoff, the Boston bombing, the Central Park Five, Martha Stewart, many of these cases that I've covered too. Intense public interest in these. What sort of responsibility do you think courtroom artists have to the public in telling these stories?
Just to be honest, just to be to give a good representation of what the emotional temperature in the room is. We're the only thing that they've got, and you want to do a very good job. Obviously, you want to have spot-on portraits, and you want to create a dynamic where you get to feel a little bit of what is going on between the characters.
Have you given any thought to how you're going to capture the moment when the verdict is read in a few weeks?
Oh, gracious, no. Hold on to your hats.
Well, Christine, we so appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much for joining us as you are covering, whether you're thinking about it or not, something quite historic.
Yeah.
And we do really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, in another high-profile legal battle, TikTok is fighting back, now suing the U.S. government over recent legislation that would force the popular social media platform to be sold from its Chinese parent company or face a ban in the United States. Now the social media giant says the potential ban violates the First Amendment. Take a look.
Calling a ban so obviously unconstitutional, TikTok sued the U.S. government, trying to undo the legislation signed into law last month that would force its Chinese parent company to sell within a year or see it banned. TikTok and ByteDance arguing the law disregards less extreme alternatives and is simply not possible, not commercially, not technologically, not legally. Adding the law will force a shutdown of TikTok by January 19, 2025, silencing the 170 million Americans who use the platform.
Do you think there's a chance here that TikTok successfully challenges this?
I think TikTok has a chance, and if they can articulate that their First Amendment rights are being denied, then the government may have to show that the legislation was necessary to achieve a compelling interest.
The Department of Justice declined to comment on the lawsuit, but in a recent interview, FBI Director Christopher Wray telling Lester TikTok is a national security concern because it is beholden to the Chinese government.
It has to do with the recommendation algorithm. It has to deal with the software. We're talking about the ability to control or collect data on millions and millions of users.
TikTok arguing unspecified national security concerns are not enough of a reason to restrict free speech and has previously denied it provides American user data to China.
The TikTok finally fires back.
Some of the app's users today celebrating the lawsuit.
They feel like they have a case.
A case in which TikTok says it is being unfairly singled out and is ready to prove as much in court.
So what happens from here, right? Well, first, the lawsuit was filed with this particular court, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. It was essentially written into this law that was the only court where a challenge to this legally could come. And it's kind of like the second highest court in the land. So it's likely going to take months for arguments to be made there and to get a ruling. That's after the government most likely files a motion to dismiss. From there, an appeal would go straight to the U.S. Supreme Court.
People in western Michigan are cleaning up after several suspected tornadoes touched down Tuesday. Dozens of workers were trapped in this FedEx facility near Kalamazoo after the side of the building was ripped off. Look at that, by this powerful storm. Crews spent several hours clearing debris before rescuing the roughly 50 people inside of there. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt. This nearby mobile home park and shopping center were destroyed by one of the suspected twin tornadoes that tore through the area. We're also keeping an eye on severe storms targeting the plains, parts of the southern plains, and even into Mississippi, Tennessee, and Ohio river valleys.
Yeah,
today.
meteorologist Michelle Grossman is here on set with us with the latest. Michelle, good morning.
Hi there, guys. Great to see you. And yeah, another day of severe weather. We're going to see it today, also Thursday, and possibly into Friday. This is what it's going to look like today. 56 million people at risk. So many millions of people. And the real estate is just so large. It extends from portions of Texas all the way to portions of the Northeast. The target area here is in the yellow, the orange, the red, especially the red. This is where we could see some strong tornadoes. Nashville, Paducah, Springfield. We could see some really large hail, giant hail, 2 inches or larger, strong tornadoes, winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. But certainly where you see the orange, we could see some really strong storms as well. That's Indianapolis, down in Dallas, Waco, and places that have seen severe weather so many times this season already. This is what it looks like on radar right now. We are really active overnight. We're starting to calm down a bit, but that's going to reignite as we get through the daytime hours with that daytime heating into the evening and overnight hours. So we're still seeing heavy rain. A lot of these storms are going to be training over the same area. The ground is so saturated. We're looking at rainfall rates of 1, 2, 3 inches per hour. So that's going to be a concern as well. We do have severe thunderstorm warnings this morning. That's where you see the orange box. But that will be the big story. Also, the chance for tornado warnings as we go throughout the day. 13 million people under flood alerts. We have the green there. That is a flood watch. So places like St. Louis, Nashville, Knoxville, London, Chattanooga could see some flooding. And we could see some flash flooding as well, especially in that really pink area, moderate risk for Nashville. That's going to be an area where you want to be weather alert today. And heed any warnings, be weather aware as you go throughout your Wednesday. So as we go throughout the next couple of days, rain will be a big problem, especially in the Tennessee Valley where you see those darker colors. We're expecting over 3 inches of rain. Certainly could be higher within any specific storms. So this is the setup here. We have an area of low pressure. It's a strong one that's bringing those severe risks to portions of Texas all the way to West Virginia. Also looking at the chance for some wet weather in New England. Then by tomorrow, more showers in the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast. Once again, we're looking at that severe zone from the central Texas parts of Texas to the East Coast. So again, another tough day. And then by Friday, soggy conditions for most of the East Coast. You guys, we have been tracking severe weather for so many days and unfortunately in the same spot. So again, another weather alert day.
I know that old April showers bring May flowers. It's like April was wild, May is wild. It's been a wild spring altogether.
Blooming flower fields by June.
Yeah, hopefully.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
All right, now to Washington, where President Biden marked Holocaust Remembrance Day by denouncing the recent wave of anti-Semitic incidents since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas. This comes as college students continue pro-Palestinian protests on campuses across the U.S. and political pressure increases on the president. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has more.
With an explosion of violent clashes and hateful comments directed at Jews on campuses nationwide, President Biden is condemning what he calls a ferocious surge of anti-Semitism.
There's no place on any campus in America, any place in America, for anti-Semitism or hate speech or threats of violence of any kind.
With a bipartisan group of leaders holding photos of Holocaust victims, the president drew parallels between the horrors of the Holocaust and Hamas's terror attack on Israel on October 7th, the deadliest day for Jews since World War II.
People are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror. It was Hamas that brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you.
President Biden's been facing intensifying pressure from progressive Democrats calling on him to stop sending arms to Israel.
There are protests all over the country. We have a president that just refuses to talk.
And from Republicans blaming him for not criticizing the protests sooner.
Instead of protecting Jewish students, Joe Biden has pandered to the pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party.
The latest flashpoint, the University of Chicago. Police in riot gear sweeping in to clear a pro-Palestinian encampment, scuffling with demonstrators protesting Israel sending tanks into southern Gaza. Those protests amplify a politically challenging issue for the president, who polls show is losing support among young voters. Meanwhile, the Anti-Defamation League reports anti-Semitic incidents, harassment, vandalism, and violence are up 140% in the last year, surging nearly 900% in the last decade.
That was Peter Alexander reporting. President Biden's speech comes as he's been critical of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war in Gaza. The president says his commitment to Israel's security is, quote, ironclad despite disagreements.
Well, the White House says it's still optimistic that a ceasefire deal can be reached in Gaza despite Israel rejecting a Hamas-agreed proposal. Negotiations are continuing in Cairo today. The talks come after IDF troops seized control of the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing in what Israel called a limited incursion. But relief agencies are accusing Israel of choking off aid to the decimated Palestinian enclave by shutting down that crossing. The UN Secretary General joined an international chorus urging Israel to end the Rafah assault.
I'm disturbed and distressed by the renewed military activity in Rafah by the Israeli Defense Forces. Make no mistake, a full-scale assault on Rafah would be a human catastrophe. Countless more civilian casualties, countless more families forced to flee yet again with nowhere safe to go, because there is no safe place in Gaza.
NBC News International correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from southern Israel. Raf, what is the latest on these ceasefire talks in Cairo?
Savannah, Christine, good morning. We're in Kibbutz Nir Oz. It's one of the communities overrun by Hamas on October 7th. And today it is one of the places praying hardest for a ceasefire deal. There are 36 hostages from Nir Oz still being held by Hamas in Gaza right now. As you said, Savannah, those ceasefire negotiations are continuing in Cairo. There are discrepancies between the deal Israel has agreed to, the deal Hamas says it can agree to. I'll give you just one example. Hamas says in the first phase of the deal, it is prepared to release 33 hostages from the so-called humanitarian category. So that's women, it's children, it's the elderly, it's people with serious medical conditions. But they are saying some of those hostages may be living and others may be dead bodies. And Israel is saying that is a non-starter and that in the first phase of this deal, live hostages have to come out. Guys.
Raf, let's talk about the situation in Rafah right now. Israeli troops seized the crossing there. Are people there fearful that a broader ground assault is imminent in that city? And is any aid getting in right now?
Yeah, absolutely. People are terrified. The Israeli government has been threatening for months to launch an all-out assault on the city of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinian civilians are sheltering. We saw waves of Israeli airstrikes followed by Israeli ground troops moving in. Israel says this is a limited operation. It's about seizing control of the Rafah crossing, and it's about putting pressure on Hamas at the negotiating table. But the Rafah crossing remains shut right now. The UN says it is absolutely critical to get it open, to get aid flowing through it once again. And at this point, there is no timeline from Israel as to when that might happen. Guys.
And Raf, a senior administration official has told NBC News that the U.S. halted a shipment of weapons to Israel over concerns about exactly this, that they would be used in Rafah. A ground invasion in the city is something, of course, that President Biden had warned against. What more are we learning about this, and could we see more shipments withheld going forward?
Yeah, potentially. So this shipment that has been put on hold is for heavy weaponry. That includes 2,000-pound bombs. Those are the kinds of bombs that have caused such large-scale civilian casualties in Gaza throughout the war. The administration says it is very concerned about how those weapons might be used in Rafah, just given how densely packed it is with civilians at this point. The White House is saying it's taking this shipment by shipment, but this is the first time that it is explicitly putting one of these aid deliveries, weapons deliveries on hold. And there is a possibility that if the U.S. doesn't see further changes to the way that Israel is prosecuting this war inside of Gaza, we might see other shipments held out. Guys.
All right, Raf Sanchez, thank you very much, as always, for your reporting.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.